When Metroid Prime 4 was announced back at E3 2017, for everyone that was keeping up with the Nintendo Switch from then onwards, there was a tone shift surrounding Metroid. Its fans went ballistic over the announcement, and those who haven't really taken the time to broach the series, which according to the numbers is a huge majority of gamers, the excitement was curious and contagious. For the first time in a while, there was a sense of hope around this franchise that had been long, kind of mostly dead, and it felt as if it was incubating until, well, where is it? It's almost midway through 2020, and besides the news that Prime 4 had to be restarted and 2 classic games on Nintendo Switch Online and all, we've seen hide nor hair of this franchise on Switch. And I know the way this year is going has been a surprise and a half, but I'm of the firm belief that if Nintendo wants it to become one of their blockbuster franchises, Metroid needs to come to the Switch in 2020. And as we all know, Metroid was even teased, or at least referenced, in a recent trailer for Paper Mario and the Origami King, so I think Nintendo knows this too. Let's talk about it. So if you didn't gather it from the intro, the point I'm trying to make is not that Metroid needs to be on the Switch in 2020 because that's its last chance to exist, or that no one will buy it if it isn't. But there are certain communal and circumstantial factors on top of just the quality of a game that'll determine its fate beyond its specific fandom. We all know that historical fans of Metroid are gonna buy the next 10 Metroid games that come out, and in this case, I think many who are just straight up Nintendo fans at large will buy the next 1 or 2 games to give them a chance. But there are dominoes that need to line up for a game to reach the biggest possible audience it can reach, and that's the crux of it. For Metroid to reach the widest possible audience, ensure a commercial success, and therefore solidify it as a priority franchise to Nintendo that deserves more game entries, we need to see it represented on the Switch in 2020. And it's not surprising we're talking about Metroid needing to do well for Nintendo to see it as a priority, because although Nintendo is obviously proud of it as an IP, they're aware that the games have never been sales juggernauts. In the past, the franchise has sold around 1 million units for a lot of entries, peaking at 2.8 with Metroid Prime. And those aren't franchise-ending numbers, of course, but there's certainly nothing for Nintendo to hang their hat on either. And the tricky part seems to have been for Nintendo to figure out how to actually increase the numbers, as they've largely trended downward with every release. But if we look at similar games today, there's precedent for growth, especially with Nintendo's marketing behind it. As 2D Metroid goes, it is one of the mothers of the Metroidvania genre, and over a year ago, Team Cherry reported that their indie game Hollow Knight, which is also a Metroidvania, had sold 2.8 million units in just 2 years, which is as much as the top-selling Metroid game. But then looking at the 3D world to compare to Metroid Prime, there may not be a ton of games that are exactly the same, but fairly similar in some regards is Jedi Fallen Order, which has now topped 10 million sold. And to be honest, I think Nintendo sees that trend and sees the potential cultural cachet that Metroid has, especially following the Metroid Prime 4 reveal at E3 2017, and is planning their cards accordingly, or they were. Nintendo was doing everything right as they announced Prime 4 when expectations in general were super high for the Switch. It had been hit after hit in a stellar year, coming off glowing reviews of Breath of the Wild, and looking forward to more returns to form with Mario Odyssey, and skies seemed to be the limit. Truth be told, seeing as the game seemed early in development, the E3 Prime 4 announcement was a risk, but if it panned out right, it was an opportunity they had to take. The buzz was hot for a whole year and a half and peaked right before the Game Awards, when rumors had been swirling that just like when we saw Bayo 1, 2, and 3 the year before, Nintendo would now unveil the Metroid Prime Trilogy HD for Switch, along with just a bit more info on such a hotly anticipated title as Metroid Prime 4. And then, nothing. We got Joker for Smash, which was great, and a few smaller announcements, but no sign of Metroid. Until a month later, when we got the bittersweet news that the game was being unfortunately restarted and handed back over to Retro Studios. And this, in my opinion, was the start of 2 alternate timelines. Both saved us from getting a bad Metroid Prime 4 that would have sealed the fate of Metroid once again. But either Nintendo takes this opportunity to roll out Metroid's future in the most successful way possible, or the hype will have died out, great games will sell decently, and much of it will be too little, too late. And that's the thing, I think. The hype around the games is really what makes franchises go from moderate to incredible successes. The Switch is possibly one of the times in Nintendo's history where the user base is the closest to unanimous in a long time. That can be seen partly through the high attach rate of games on the Switch. If 31% of its user base owns Breath of the Wild, then that's an incredible commonality, especially in a game designed with core gamers in mind, as Metroid is. So, as I said, hype is a contagious force that needs to be in a game's favor. Take Animal Crossing New Horizons compared to Daemon X Machina. New Horizons is already the best-selling Animal Crossing game of all time, and I don't even need to explain why. But on the other hand, Daemon X Machina seems to have sold pretty pitifully last year, when the install base wasn't that much smaller. But everyone who got to play it early was frustrated because their videos were being taken down for showing the game, so it really only got bad buzz, which in turn hurt the game, regardless of whether the game was even good or not. So why 2020? Well, there's two reasons. Number one, just due to the natural fate of being pervasive in the conversation, we've had a year and a half since Prime 4 was postponed for Nintendo to announce anything else Metroid, and they haven't. And there are rumors that'll keep the conversation going, but outside of the community that keeps up with that, interest will just continue to dwindle because it won't feel quite as new or exciting to those who just won't be excited regardless. And the second reason is that Paper Mario thing. Whether they realize it or not, and I suspect that they do, but we'll get into that, Nintendo set themselves a timer. They brought up the elephant in the room just like Reggie did back with the Metroid pin announcing the Game Awards for 2018, and they raised hopes. But we all know the fable of the boy who cried wolf. I think Nintendo has their ears to the ground much more than we realize, and they know people are clamoring for Metroid news. But if they bring it up carelessly without following through too many times, then we'll become desensitized to it and it loses effect. Like Atlas does with announcements for announcements of announcements. It's tiresome. But I do think that either Nintendo knows what they're doing here or they're really tone deaf. So on May 14th, we got a trailer for Paper Mario and the Origami King that ended with this little number of Mario wearing a papier-mâché Samus helmet and saying, there's something you don't see every day. He certainly looks intimidating. Is he battling something? So this is really interesting, but our options here are either this is something or it's not. It wouldn't be unlike Paper Mario to make nods to other games, even in a sense like this, but to feature it as a post-credit scene in the unveiling of a game? Even though Tanabe is involved with this and Prime, if this isn't a tease, then they don't understand how people watch Marvel movies. But on the other hand, what if this is something? And to be fair, this whole conversation is relevant irrespective of the Paper Mario tease, but as I mentioned, that expedites the need. Well, if it is something, I think it's got to be one of the next one or two things Nintendo announces. We've recently heard more rumors that they aren't looking to announce much through directs this season, so that allows them the freedom to announce a game and release it seemingly as soon as 2 months away. That is the cadence so far for Paper Mario, and that's a full big budget release, so the precedent is set if that's what you're looking for. And at this point, I could see them announcing the game sometime around June or July for an August or September release, depending on what else they have going on. The kind of game this would be is another question entirely. First off, there's no chance it's Metroid Prime 4. There's a ton we don't know about that game, and depending on how much they really did scrap from the original, it could be further along than we think. But as they're still hiring high-level art designers, and not to mention this year is definitely pushing projects out, it's definitely not that. Another option is the Metroid Prime Trilogy HD, and if we're to believe rumors, this game has been done for a long time, and they're just sitting on it for a while. And I have conflicting thoughts on how to handle this game now, as I'm sure Nintendo does. If they are sitting on it, then obviously its main purpose was to support the hype and release cycle for Metroid Prime 4. Probably release the trilogy within 2 months of an announcement, and then Prime 4 within a year of that announcement. And this would be ideal, as people would get to play through the trilogy knowing in the back of their minds that this is just a primer, yes, absolutely, for the next game in the series. So in that case, having Trilogy be the first game back in a while, that's totally fine. But if Prime 4 is nowhere to be seen, I have a feeling that the general public would feel like the trilogy would be exciting, but also a bit of a cop-out, and that's probably why they're holding their cards so close to their chest. So I kind of don't think it should be the first Metroid property announced for or released on the Switch, but should also be far enough out from Prime 4 to avoid fatigue by the time that releases. So that one's tricky. But if those games aren't first, then what is? Well, the logical answer is some kind of 2D game. This could reasonably be one of 4 titles: Metroid 5, as in a brand new 2D Metroid that continues the story, a remake of Super Metroid, as has been rumored, remake of Metroid Fusion, as has also been rumored, or an upscaled port of Samus Returns. All of these would be exciting to varying degrees, but if we're talking about what would benefit the longevity of the franchise, I think a solid Metroid 5 comes first, followed by a remake of Super Metroid, since that's number 3 in the series, and there are remakes of 1 and 2 already, and then Metroid Fusion, and finally, Samus Returns. I think that game will get ported eventually, but seeing as they announced it wisely as an afterthought, I can't see them going back on that tactic now. And the last option of what it could be, and in my mind is basically impossible, is anything else. Nintendo should know that this isn't the time to take risks with Metroid. They can and should do that with some of their other franchises that need to come back at all, but in this case, we know that Metroid is coming back, so they have to do the franchise right, which is finally make something that the core fans really get behind and promote for them. If that happens, and at the right cadence, when everyone is still interested and intrigued, then Metroid could finally become one of Nintendo's really high-performing franchises. And I think the key ingredient there is striking while the iron is hot here in 2020. But that's what I think. What do you think? It doesn't matter at all if Metroid comes this year. Will people wait indefinitely, or has that time already even passed? Let me know all that and more in the comment section down below, and we'll pull some of those comments for our podcast this weekend on directly to you on Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to fanatixfour for more videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And feel free to share this video with a friend who loves Metroid, or one that doesn't even know what it is. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time.